Hello and welcome to Global Lens. Over the next 30 minutes, we put the spotlight on all the top stories from around the world. I'm Parikshit Luthra. These are the top global headlines we're tracking. The World Bank expects global growth to slow down to 2008 levels of 2.3%, excluding recessions, cites rising trade barriers and policy uncertainty. Also cuts India's growth projections by 40 basis points to 6.3% for FY26. Over 60 killed in Gaza overnight in Israeli air raids. Tel Aviv deports Greta Thunberg a day after the Israeli Navy seized a Gaza-bound boat with a Swedish activist and others on board. Israel's foreign ministry says she has been put on a flight back to Sweden. 2 people dead and dozens injured after Russia launches a major air attack on Kyiv and Odessa using over 300 drones. Ukraine's Zelensky claims Russia used at least 7 ballistic missiles and calls on the US to force Russia into peace. Let's start with all the market action. Stock markets are struggling for traction across the world as investors await the outcome of the trade talks between US and China. Before we get to that, here is how stocks closed across Asia. The Nifty was absolutely flat after a range-bound session. It managed to eke out some gains to maintain its winning streak for the 5th day running. Stocks in China ended in the red, and so did stocks in Hong Kong. Japan's Nikkei managed to end with marginal gains. The South Korean Kospi posted healthy gains after a solid session. A key indicator moving markets across Europe and US is the World Bank's growth forecast. The bank has cut global GDP estimate to 2.3%. This is the slowest pace of growth since the 2008 financial crisis, excluding recessions. World Bank is citing rising trade barriers and policy uncertainty. Sample this. The World Bank says a 10 basis point hike in tariffs by the United States will result in a 50 basis point drop in global GDP this year and a 40 basis point drop in 2026. Now, as we speak about that, US President Donald Trump has said he's optimistic on the nature of talks after US and China decided to reconvene for a second day in London. Trump said that while US officials are doing very well with China, Chinese officials are not easy. He added that he is receiving only good reports from US officials present at the meeting. Remember, any breakthrough in talks could mean good news for the markets. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer are leading the negotiations for Washington, while China's Vice Premier He Lifeng is Beijing's chief trade negotiator. The US is seeking the restoration of rare earth mineral exports from China, while China wants a lifting of export controls on semiconductor technology. China granted temporary rare earth licenses to suppliers of US auto giants like General Motors and Ford. However, the worry over shortage of critical minerals in factories worldwide continues. India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal also weighed in on the matter. He said that China's export curbs on rare earth magnets is a wake-up call for the whole world. Goyal added that countries need to diversify their supply chains and India is actively working on developing alternatives. Now, when it comes to the US-China talks, what could they likely have in terms of an outcome? Joining us right now is Geoffrey Gertz, Senior Fellow at the Center for New American Security. He's also served as the Director of International Economics at the White House in the past. Geoffrey, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Let me begin by asking you, how serious is this situation for the United States? They've really fielded 3 top cabinet ministers for the trade negotiations with China in Beijing.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Happy to be here. So look, I think this is a big priority for the U.S. administration. It's very obvious the U.S. trade negotiating team has been very busy of late. Obviously, there's both the China discussions as well as all of the other discussions going on with other U.S. trade partners around the world in negotiations around the reciprocal tariffs announced earlier in April. So I think the fact that they are sending 3 top officials signifies how big an impact this is. And then I think, the fact that they've decided to stay on for a second day is, if nothing else, at least a positive sign, but also underlines, how much importance the U.S. is putting on this to have all 3 officials stay for a second day.
Geoffrey, what's your expectation? How much room or how much space is the United States likely to give China in these negotiations?
So that's the real question that we are all waiting for outcomes of these talks to better understand. Going into these talks, it seems clear the focus was going to be on export controls. On the U.S. side, they are very concerned about Chinese export controls on rare earths and, freeing up those rare earths, which are critical for a number of sort of military defense industrial-based reasons, but also for automobiles, semiconductors, many other sectors. Meanwhile, the Chinese side, we know, will have a number of asks on U.S. export controls, and really the set of high technology controls the United States has put in place over the last kind of 8 or 10 years. I think, frankly, there's probably not too much scope for the U.S. to be lessening those, particularly the controls on high-end chips. Think of the kind of NVIDIA chips for advanced AI reasons. But there may be some lessening of some more recent U.S. controls put in place over the last few weeks, thinking about things like semiconductor software and that type of thing. There may be some relaxing there.
Right. Now, when it comes to the U.S. industry, do you feel that this time Donald Trump is under pressure from the U.S. industry to have a truce with China?
So the U.S. industry certainly has been pushing this for a while. I think above all else, what U.S. industry wants is clarity on the policy here. I think we've heard from a lot of U.S. industry folks that, frankly, they were okay with a policy of de-risking as long as it was done in a predictable, clear way, and they sort of know where the goalposts are and what they need to work between. So really what I think industry wants is greater clarity on what U.S. policy will be, and not these sort of big swings in policy of sort of 100% tariffs on one week, off the next week. We will see if we get that out of this meeting. I think whatever outcome is, there will still be a fair bit of uncertainty, but I do think industry really is pushing for clarity here.
Right. On the rare earth magnets issue, as a goodwill gesture, China had lifted curbs on at least some companies. But US, like all other nations and all companies, would need a sustained pipeline of rare earth magnets. How much does the US stand to lose if China does not lift those curbs on rare earth magnets?
So it's clear this is an area of significant Chinese leverage over the United States, but really over the global economy writ large. That there are many of these rare earths that are, at the moment at least, produced kind of either exclusively or nearly exclusively in China and processed there, and that are critical for any number of critical supply chains, again, in sort of defense military aspects, but also in many other sectors of the economy. So China does have a card to play here. It's been very clear, and they're willing to show that they will play this card. Again, the challenge will be China can give some signals that they will kind of allow a more predictable flow of these rare earths to come out. But frankly, at the moment, the Chinese have now developed the bureaucracy and the infrastructure to control these rare earths. It's going to be hard to get any lasting guarantee that they won't kind of turn off those taps if kind of future pressures emerge in the months ahead.
Right. Now, when it comes to China, clearly China is also hurting as a result of these trade wars and tariff wars. China's exports to the US plunged almost 35% in May, which was the sharpest fall since February 2020 during COVID-19. Do you feel the United States also has enough tools in the box in order to tighten the screws on the Chinese economy?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think what we're seeing here, these are sort of the risks of interdependence, which is both sides have a fair bit of leverage over one another. So we do see some real pain that the U.S. inflicted through its tariffs on China. I think having brought back those tariffs a few weeks ago has alleviated that somewhat, but it's clear that that remains a sticking point and a point of leverage. We will see. I think realistically, there are going to be moments of détente in this economic trade war between these two superpowers. But I do think over time, the pressures are going to continue, and the kind of economic drive towards greater de-risking between these economies will continue because, frankly, both governments are trying to prepare their populations to say, look, this may be economically costly, and there may be some pain here.
Right. China is also looking not just at tariff concessions and a truce, but also there is anger with the manner in which Chinese students have been treated, how visas are not going to be given to them. So they're possibly looking at a package of measures which are not just economic, but people to people as well. Do you think the current Trump administration, with the current mood, will go in and give those concessions?
So we'll see. I think the foreign student visas sort of generally has been a tricky topic, and then kind of China has specific concerns on it as well. I certainly do agree this is going to be a topic of conversation in these talks. I do think there's probably some flexibility for the Trump administration to, make some moves about how they're doing screening of foreign students, or kind of, adding in some additional safeguards there while still ensuring that students are able to visit the United States from China. So I'm hopeful there may be scope for an agreement here, but we'll have to wait and see.
Right, and we've seen how the global forecast has come from the World Bank, and it clearly paints a worrying picture as a result of the tariffs. Do you think somewhere Donald Trump and his team would be worried as to the kind of impact this is going to have on the US economy, on the global economy?
So they're certainly paying attention to it. I do think we saw back in April the bond movements in the United States was a real kind of sharp, unexpected wake-up call for the team, and that really sort of pushed them to kind of dial back some of the tariffs, at least for the medium term. So I do think they are responsive to those types of signals. That said, I do think this administration has come in and has clearly said that they understand there will be transition costs, there will be short-term costs. They are thinking about this in very big picture terms in terms of resetting the global economy. And so they are trying to prepare US voters and US industry to say, look, there will be some short-term costs here. In their view, this is sort of worth it for the kind of ultimate picture of resetting the global economy and bringing more investment onshore in the United States. I think kind of huge open question about whether that's successful or not, but that is the narrative that they are trying to paint.
All right. My final question to you would be, if there is a positive outcome in these talks, either today or tomorrow, which are the companies or sectors in the United States which are likely to benefit, where the stocks could possibly see an uptick, according to you, in the next few days?
Sure. Well, I'll sort of start with the caveat that I'm glad I'm not in the business of being a professional stock picker here. But I do think, auto companies are ones who are under some real pressure from these rare earths export controls. So that's an area where I think we'd see something. And maybe semiconductors as well, again, depending on sort of any concessions the U.S. may make on some of its export controls.
All right. Thank you very much. And of course, the rare earth magnet issue is a big one for India as well, Geoffrey. And it was a pleasure speaking to you here on CNBC-TV18 Global Lens. Let's move on now. We are going to take a short break at this point. But when we return, we will continue the focus on the US-China trade talks with Wall Street Journal's Jonathan Cheng on the other side. Be right back. Welcome back to Global Lens. A quick look at the headlines. At least 10 people have died and several injured after a school shooting in Austria. The suspected shooter, who is believed to be a former student of the school, is reported to have died of suicide. 28 people are being treated for their injuries in hospital. 3 days of mourning have been declared in Austria. Pakistan has increased its defense budget after the clashes with India. The hike comes at a time when the country has cut its overall budget outlay to keep its fiscal deficit in check. Total defense outlay has been hiked by 20% to more than $9 billion, but overall expenditure has shrunk by over 7% to $62 billion. Private equity giant Blackstone is planning to invest $500 billion in Europe over the next decade. Speaking to Bloomberg, CEO Steve Schwarzman called it a major opportunity and cited potential higher growth across the continent. The move underscores growing investor interest in Europe and amid global uncertainty. ChatGPT faces a major global outage. The disruption began around 3 p.m. IST with down detector logging over 1,100 complaints at its peak. Many users reported issues accessing the popular AI chatbot. Services are gradually being restored. Additionally, its parent OpenAI hit $10 billion in annual recurring revenue. This includes sales from its consumer products, ChatGPT business products, and API. Paramount Global is cutting its US-based workforce by 3.5% as the company grapples with a decline in cable TV subscribers. The layoffs also come at a time when Paramount is seeking regulatory approval for its proposed merger with Skydance Media. Warner Brothers, Discovery, and Disney also reportedly cut jobs in the recent weeks. Disney has agreed to pay Comcast $438 million to take full control of streaming service Hulu. Disney had initially paid $8.6 billion to Comcast in 2023, but after that, Disney and Comcast were in an appraisal process for the remaining payment. Disney's move brings an end to the lengthy valuation process. Microsoft-backed French AI firm Mistral has launched its first reasoning model designed to compete directly with leading options from OpenAI and China's DeepSeek. CEO Arthur Mensch said that the new model specializes in reasoning in European languages. These models can execute more complicated tasks through a step-by-step, logical thought process. Uber is planning to launch trials of its fully autonomous rides in the UK from spring 2026 through a partnership with AI startup Wave. Uber said that the pilot will allow users to take Uber rides without a safety driver present. The trials will combine Wave's AI-powered driving platforms with Uber's mobility app. Let's shift our focus back to the US-China trade talks. Joining us right now is Jonathan Cheng, China Bureau Chief at the Wall Street Journal. Jonathan, thank you very much for being with us. Has there been any kind of breakthrough in talks between US and China in London so far?
Well, we're just starting out day 2 here. I don't think there's been any breakthrough yet, but I think hopes are high that there will be some sort of an announcement today. Obviously, there are a lot of reasons for both sides to want to make a deal. Each side has the other at a pain point, and each side wants to resolve it. So I think that's really what you're seeing here, but whether or not they can get those details ironed out to the extent that both sides are comfortable with it is another matter. But I think we saw in Geneva just a few weeks ago, the last time the US and China had their top trade negotiators meet, they were able to come to an agreement pretty quickly.
Jonathan, any likelihood of China relaxing export restrictions on rare earth magnets?
Well, I think that's the top demand of the US government. So if there's going to be any deal at all, I would imagine that we would see China relenting on the rare earth export restrictions. Effectively, what China is saying here is that these are, this is a national security issue. It's not to say we won't allow exports, but we need to have them vetted. The problem from the US side is that it's happening too slowly. And so what that's done is it's actually thrown a monkey wrench into the supply chains for automakers, many of whom rely upon these rare earth metals and for the magnets that are made from them in order to keep production going. So again, this is something that China has some leverage on, and I don't think they'll give it away for free, but I think that's the idea here, that there's something that can be traded here.
And Jonathan, what is China really looking for from these trade talks in Beijing?
Well, obviously, I think in any negotiation, China is going to try to get as much as it can possibly get, and they do have a lot of different asks on a lot of different fronts. The main thing, though, is I think access to semiconductor related products. They're looking to avoid having restrictions on purchases of software that is used to make and design chips, as well as, all sorts of things, lithography machines, just access to high-end chips. So, I mean, that's something that they want to get, and they'll get as much as they can get. I don't think the US is going to give them everything, but I think that they'll push as hard as they can get. And then there are things that go beyond technology as well. We saw the US government basically say that it is going to vet and potentially expel Chinese international students who are studying in the US, of which there are more than 200,000. Whether or not we get an agreement that is so broad that it includes international students, I wouldn't be that optimistic that it will be that broad, but it's possible, and it's certainly true that from China's perspective, they would like things like that to be lifted as well.
And Jonathan, why is China not lifting export restrictions on rare earth magnets for India?
Well, I can't explain exactly what the thinking is in Beijing. I mean, I'm in the city, but I don't have access to the decision makers who are making these calls. But it won't be a surprise to your viewers, of course, that there has been a lot of geopolitical tension between China and India in recent years. Some of that has eased, but it doesn't mean that there aren't still issues. The border dispute has still not been resolved, for example. I don't know if that is the reason why. It's possible that China sees India as a rival in terms of doing business in general, and doesn't want to give India the chance to be able to thrive in that same way. I don't know if that is the motivation or not. There may be any number of reasons, but perhaps China is looking for some leverage for some sort of a deal with India. I think right now we're in an environment where I think partly following the example of Donald Trump, many countries are looking very coldly at the leverage that they have over different trading partners, over other countries, and seeking to use them to maximize their own advantage.
All right, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us on Global Lens this evening. And this is a story that we continue to track very closely. We'll be keeping an eye out for the outcome on those trade talks in London. Let's move on and take a look at some trending stories. Artificial intelligence took a back seat at Apple's annual developer conference. However, the tech giant announced a software design revamp and a set of new applications. The latest software upgrade is expected to change the way Apple devices will look. In the case of AI announcements, it was limited to few features and lacked last year's focus. Meta's Mark Zuckerberg is personally setting up a team of experts to achieve artificial general intelligence. As per Bloomberg, this after he found Meta falling behind in AI advancement. His plan is to personally recruit around 50 people, including a new head of AI research for the AGI team. He plans to fund this AI program from Meta's advertising business. After a 5-year hiatus, K-pop supergroup BTS members, popularly known as RM and V, have been discharged from the South Korean military after mandatory service. 2 other band members, Jin and J-Hope, were released earlier and have been performing solo, while the other 3 are expected to wrap military service by the 21st of June. The globally renowned group has not released a group project since 2022, but fans are hopeful as members look forward to reuniting soon. A treasure trove of Princess Diana's iconic fashion is heading to auction this month. From vibrant frocks and chic hats to handbags and shoes, a wide range of items once owned by the late princess will be up for auction in what's going to be the largest ever sale of her wardrobe, titled Princess Diana's Style and a Royal Collection. The live and online auction will take place on the 26th of June at the Peninsula Beverly Hills. On Final Cut this evening, protests over the Trump administration's immigration raids continue in Los Angeles and are expected to spread across California and beyond this week. Police attempt to quell the protests using tear gas and detention. U.S. President Donald Trump activates 700 Marines and additional 2,000 National Guard troops to protect federal personnel and property. We leave you with the visuals of the clashes on the streets of LA. That's all from us on Global Lens. We'll see you same time, same place tomorrow. Thank you for watching.